All right, we're going to go ahead and get started now. So once again, my name is Tom Lyons. I'm a senior engineer over at Inflow Communications, coming up on just about 6 years of unified communications experience. Very well acquainted with the ShoreTel and Mitel platforms, as well as Genesys Pure Cloud and Ring Central. As we get in today, I wanted to go over a few webinars that we do have coming up as well. On the 14th, we do have a webinar on Mitel's migration plans for your contact center. So you'll be able to get all sorts of good information about what's going to be coming up for your contact center in the Mitel environment, what to expect moving forward. And then on the 11th of December, we have a webinar on the ShoreTel 14.2 to connect migration and what to expect. So this will cover the changes in the infrastructure and what you'll see on the administrative side for that migration, what to expect to get set up and ready for that, and what your users will experience moving forward. A little bit about Inflow before we get started in today's webinar. Inflow has a sole focus on unified communications and contact center solutions. Voice is what we do. We don't branch into other things like networking. We solely focus on voice, and as a result, everybody you get on the support side will be able to help you with anything you need. We'll be very well acquainted with your system. We are a Mitel Platinum partner, as well as partnered with Ring Central and Genesys Pure Cloud. We have offices and employees in 10 states. And currently service over 180,000 endpoints and over 800 customers nation, and in many cases even worldwide. And we are maniacal about the customer experience. We want to make sure you get all the information and then some that you would need to make sure that your voice environment is going to give you everything you need for your business. And here's just a little snippet of some of the customers that we support. So we're going to jump right into it today. What we're going to do here is go over kind of what we will need on the Mitel side for certificates, how to get what you need, what can be used in the system, and then some basics as to how to actually set these up in the system. Before we get started, I just want to make something real clear here. Certificates are only supported on the Connect platform. So if you are currently using ShoreTel 14.2, you would need to upgrade to Connect before we can actually do anything with certificates due to limitations in 14.2 and in particular just no support for SSL certificates. There are other devices such as the SA100 that can be used with certificates in the 14 system, and we are going to go over those briefly today. But a little bit more about the certificates and what they're used for in the system here. By default, the Mitel system will use a port 80 or HTTP for your connections to the server, as well as your connections via the client. So it is going to use those basic ports. You can use a SSL cert to enable HTTPS in the system and make your environment more secure. This is something that can be used for things like remote phones and remote offices, or just even internally if you want it to be set up that way. A variety of devices support these certificates, ranging from the servers themselves now in Connect to other platforms like the Edge Gateway, used for remote phone authentication, your mobility router, which is used for the cell phone application so that you can take calls on the go. And then also the SA100 service appliance, which is used for web conferencing, audio conferencing, and instant messaging functionality, can all be set up to use these certificates. Wildcard certificates are supported, which is a very nice thing for this, especially if you have many devices to certify here. Which in many cases is going to be the case because you will need one for each server as well as any devices that you would want to have secure, like your Edge Gateway. And finally, to do any of these items, we strongly recommend a maintenance window to get these certs applied. And the reason for that is, in particular, the 400 series phones, which use these certs for options like their history and directory functions, so that they can actually look people up in the system and look at call history for your users, require the use of these certs and require the chain to be valid. So you can run into issues there. And then the other piece to that is that often these phones will retain the old certificate even if there was a change made, so they do need a config clear from time to time. So a maintenance window is strongly recommended. A little bit about these certs and what to know. Out of the box, as I just briefly mentioned, the server and platform for Mitel will actually use self-signed certificates. This is totally fine for general operation, and in general, because your ShoreTel system should be behind any public access and only really communicating internally, will never generally be a problem. The one thing that most people see when they do this is they'll see the little yellow checkbox or a lockbox in their Connect client saying that the system is not secure. That's just letting you know you don't have a validated third-party cert that's on the system. In order to get that to go away, you would need to deploy a third-party certificate that can be validated to your servers in order for that checkbox to be, or that lockbox to be able to show as secure. And that's the main thing that we get a ticket or complaint about when it comes to the client and certificates. So that's one thing to know there. A third-party certificate authority, so as an example, GoDaddy can provide usable SSL certs for you. And there are wide support for certificates. So you can go from one-off domain validation, organization validation, extended validation, or even wildcard validation, which is the general way that certificates are used in the Mitel system. I do highly recommend the wildcard method, simply because you can use it for all of your devices and will allow you to get everything done with minimal effort on your side. When you actually place a request for the certificate, the vendor you go through and place the CSR with will return multiple files. Generally, you're going to get the root certificate, an intermediate certificate, and a private key. These are all going to be necessary in order to work with the system correctly. They don't need to be added to a single file, at least for most of the applications. We will get to that. And in particular, what the system will do, if you don't have all the files, is it will either tell you your cert is invalid. So if you're missing the root certificate, it will actually stop you from deploying it. But if you're missing the intermediate certificate, it will actually let you deploy the certs. But then your phone features that I mentioned previously, like your history and directory, will not work. So you want to make sure that you get all those files. If you need help generating a CSR for your devices, so if you do want to do one-off certs, for example, and not do a wildcard, the system will allow you to generate a request for the devices as well from the devices themselves. So we can assist in obtaining this information for you if required. So the first thing that we're going to talk about here is how to set up the certs in Director. And you'll see my first bullet point here. It's very important. Do not install the certs directly on the server. And what I mean by that is don't open your MMC snap-ins. Don't actually upload the cert to the repository on the server the way that you would for other servers and other certificates. This is because Director actually has a built-in functionality for it that will automate the process when the certs are applied, as well as place the cert into the appropriate folders on the ShoreTel side so that the cert can actually be honored when devices connect. If we actually put the cert in through the MMC instead of doing this process, the resulting issues that will come up will be that clients and phones will be unable to connect, and there's a potential that you may not even be able to log into Director. So it's very important that you don't actually apply the cert in that way. If you do apply a cert in that way, it will need to be removed before we can proceed. As far as how to do it, though, it's done through Director in the certificate tab, which I'm going to show you guys here in just a moment. The FQDN, or the domain name of the server in question, has to match the certificate. So if you have a star.inflowcom.com wildcard cert, for example, the FQDN would just have to match that. So maybe the server would then resolve to shoretel.inflowcom.com, and it's a wildcard certificate. That would work. If the FQDN field is showing an IP address, for example, that's not going to work because that's not going to directly work with the certificate that you have applied. So to show you as an example here, let me pull up a server. All right, there we go. And I'm going to go ahead and go to a server in question here. So in order to do this, you would click on Appliances and Servers under the wrench, and you would click on Platform Equipment. And in this particular case, we will find the headquarters server. And you'll notice there's in the 4 tabs there, we have general, which includes the fully qualified domain name, which you'll see here. Then over on the right side, you have a certificate tab. So in order to do this for a server, what you would do is you would first make sure that you have all of your certificate files. And again, to elaborate on that, you should at a minimum have your root certificate, at least one intermediate certificate, depending on your authority, you may get a couple of those, and a private key file. We're gonna need all of those in order to make things work. In addition, if there is a password for your cert, which some do, some don't, we're gonna need to know that password as well. On that cert, we're gonna need to make sure that this field under the fully qualified domain name actually matches what the cert is saying. If it does not, then your cert will not work. Finally, over on the certificate tab, you'll see that it will show a name. It will actually show your subject domain and issuer. In this particular case, you'll see an example of a self-signed cert. And the way that I know this right off the bat is you'll see in the actual subject domain as well as the issuer, you'll see ShoreTel UC, and then under issuer, you'll see ShoreTel UC certificate authority. That is the automatically regened cert that comes with the system when you install it. So this is the self-signed certificate. In order to update this cert, there's a 2-step process. You would first click on delete current certificate, which I'm not going to do because this is a system that is live, but you would have to delete the current certificate to get this process started. The second step would be to, in the general tab, make sure that that FQDN or that fully qualified domain name matches what you need it to match for the actual deployment of the cert. Finally, back under the certificate tab, you'll click on this choose files button. When you click this, it's going to open up a window browser just like anything else. You want to navigate to the cert files that you got back from your authority, and you want to make sure you select all of them. This will allow that all of those files to propagate into the system for the cert. The system will take it from there. In order to do that, you can hold Shift and click to grab all the files, or you can even just do a quick drag and drop, or a quick drag and grab if it's in a specific folder. Once you have that, you'll hit save, and what happens behind the scenes is the cert gets dropped into the key store folder in the ShoreTel directory, and then it automates a number of processes to both add the cert to the server using the MMC processes in the background, and then also alters the IIS information and bindings so that that cert will now be used for 443. So it automates all the procedures that you need to do, as well as does some internal ShoreTel changes in order to actually use the cert correctly. This is why you don't want to add the cert to the server directly, because the system automatically does it for you. Now to go back to my presentation here, you'll notice in the last bullet point, the HQ and each DVS must have a certificate to make the system secure across the board. So what we mean by that is if you just have a certificate on HQ, then anybody that's connecting directly to the headquarters server, so if anybody that's on voice switches that are managed by the headquarters server, for example, will be secure. But anybody connecting in on remote sites across different DVSs or that are managed by phone switches that are handled by a DVS are going to instead use those DVSs for their connections, for example, their client. And if that certificate does not exist on the DVS, then their client connection will actually be insecure. And the process for that is exactly the same as HQ. So to go back here, I'm going to click on this DVS, for example. And you'll see, just like the headquarters server, it has the same FQDN field, and it has the same field for the certificate. So you will just follow the exact same process. The DVS process works exactly the same way as the headquarters server, and you would apply the cert in the exact same way. And the way that it works on this side is the exact same as the HQ side, except because you're deploying to a remote server, the system will actually package up that cert, get it all set up, then it will actually ship that cert off using your network to the DVS, where it will then perform the same changes that it had to on the HQ server, and then those certs will be good to go. And that's all there is to it. If you have all the files and the files are valid meaning the expiration date of the cert is good, there's nothing missing in the chain, then you will have fully functional certs at that point. It can take a few minutes depending on your DVS and its location, but generally within about 10 to 15 minutes, those certs are good to go. And that's pretty much all there is for the HQ and server side. Fairly easy to follow. Just make sure you have all of your files there. Moving forward, there's a couple other devices that we can show as well, specifically the Edge Gateway and Mobility. And there is one thing specific for the Edge Gateway and Mobility that's different from the servers, and that is that .pem or .pem format is required for your certs. For those of you not familiar with that format, this is a format where all of the certificate pieces are in one file, which can generally be made by copying and pasting the individual files that you get from the issuer into one valid file. There are instructions for how to create a PEM file on the internet. This is one piece, just so everybody is aware, that Inflow Communications will not be able to touch for you. We will definitely help you install the certs once they are ready to go. We will also do testing and provide validation to make sure that the certs are working as expected. But one thing we don't do is take the individual cert files and put them into its own PEM format for the device. If you want any help with that, the best way to do that would be to either reach out to your issuer, who may be able to provide instructions or even the file, or there are several guides available on the internet for that piece. Once you have that, there are multiple endpoints for these devices. Specifically, Mobility and Edge Gateway have not only an internal facing interface, but they have external interfaces. In the case of the Edge Gateway, there's actually 3 different services that it uses across 3 different public IPs, and all of them require certificates. And all of the information that is needed for that device is done inside the appliance itself. So I'm going to show you that here as well. So let me pull the server right back across to us. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to find the Edge Gateway, which you'll see has a hyperlink on it. So that's this guy here. And if I click on the hyperlink, it's going to prompt me for a user and password. When I log in, it's going to pop me up to a status page. Should just take a second here. There it goes. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the configuration tab. Then on the left under system, I'm going to click on certificate, and you'll see there are 4 options for the Edge Gateway. So this is what I was talking about. So you have Edge Gateway, which is the internal interface. Then you also have RAST, which is used for remote phone authentication. Reverse proxy, which is used for client and also for contact center, if you're using remote employees for contact center. And then the turn service, which is used for just intrafunctional routing for a series of advanced applications that you can use with the Edge Gateway. Each one of these does require its own certificate. And if you click on one, so for example, if I click on RAST, you'll actually see the certificate that's in place currently. And you'll see on this particular one, it even says right in the Edge Gateway self-signed certificate. So in this particular case, it is self-signed. And if you want to import a cert, all you have to do is click on import here. When you click on import, it's going to pop up a different page for you where you can actually pop in the cert, private key and intermediate cert. You can actually paste these in and import, and that will work as well. The other piece that you can do is if you go back to the RAST here, if you needed to generate a CSR, so either a request or even just a self-signed cert, this is where you can actually generate the request. So you can click on generate here. When you do, you can punch out the country name, state, locality, all that information, the common name. If there's another name that you need, such as your DNS name for the device, and then you can either generate, which will actually create a self-signed certificate based on that, on those metrics that you could use with the device, which would be self-signed, so it would not be as secure. Or you can generate a CSR, which will generate the file that you'll require for that specific instance for the cert. And for the edge gateway, you're going to need to do that for all 4 of these. So you have certs for all 4 if you want to get third-party certs for it. For the mobility side, you will have an internal as well as external cert as well that works in much the same way. So they actually made this a little bit easier with the import compared to what it was before, because you can just throw in the root cert at the top, the private key in the middle, and the intermediate certificate in the bottom portion. You just need to know which file is which. So you can do it that way as well. And that's all there is to it for the edge gateway and the mobility certs. So go ahead and move this back again. And then finally, the SA100, which I don't have a direct access to at the moment, unfortunately, but the SA100 does have the ability to use certs just like the other devices do. This is a device that's used for web conferencing, audio conferencing, and instant messaging. If you're using web conferencing, this is where those certs would definitely be a good thing to have. Just because at that point you probably have your SA100 in a DMZ in your environment that is facing the outside, so that cert will allow you to stay secure. And it's done as the same process as the servers. You need all the files. And this is done through the device administration page. And give me 1 second. I don't think I have access to one in this lab, but let me make sure. I'm just going to look and see if there's one that I can jump into. Yeah, I do not have access to one at the current moment. However, there is a guide that we can provide for this that'll give you a step-by-step. What you're looking for in Director is much like the Edge Gateway. There's going to be a hyperlink on your SA100 appliance. You can click on that hyperlink. It will bring you to the administration page, and there is a tab specifically for HTTPS where you can enable these certs. And it works just like the server, where you can hit Browse, you select the files, you upload the files, you select the Use HTTPS checkbox, and you're off and running and good to go. And then last but not least, I wanted to add a little bit of troubleshooting information here. If you run into issues, the most common issue that we see with certificates are going to revolve around the 400 series phones. If any of you have deployed certs unsuccessfully in the past, you may know what I'm talking about. The phones generally work until you try to use the history or directory functions, which use the certificates on the server. And what will happen is they will get a rejection because the certs are much more sensitive to the cert changes than they are than anything else in the system is. Even the clients will generally tell you that the connection is insecure or the cert is not trusted, but allow you to proceed anyway. The phones don't give you that option. So that's where you could run into the most issues. The easiest way to go ahead and fix that issue, especially if it's something that needs to be fixed critically, aside from calling us, which you definitely should if you're having an issue like that, the first thing that you can do that will probably provide relief for you is if you go back to Director and delete the cert and save it, the system will actually automatically regenerate the self-signed certificate, which will then allow your operation to resume normally for the time being. So to show you that, we've already kind of shown it once or twice before, but just to show you, I'm going to go ahead and click on this DVS here. And under cert, all you would have to do is delete the current certificate and hit save. What that's going to do is remove the cert that's already on the server. It will then use built-in processes to regenerate the self-signed certificate that you were using previously. And it will then restart the World Wide Web service on the server. And will allow the self-signed certificate to start working again. We have seen as an additional step, sometimes you will sometimes need to reboot the server, although that is fairly rare. But this is a good first step, especially if it's critical, to see if your operation resumes right away. When you do install certs, especially certs on the servers themselves, make sure you're checking the history and the directory buttons on your phones. These are the two functions that use that the certificate for grabbing that information. If your cert isn't working or if the phone doesn't like it, then it's going to fail, and it's going to give you essentially a rejection or a timeout on your phone, which you can then also even verify in the IIS logs on the server, because there are a series of codes that go along with that. And Microsoft has a good set of troubleshooting steps for specific cert issues such as that. So it works much in the same way as any other cert issue that you're going to see in your environment. Another thing that you can try that I don't have listed on this slide, but another thing that you can try is a configuration clear of your 400 series phone. They do like to hold on to previous certificate stuff, which can run into issues when you do upload new certs. Sometimes that configuration clear will bring that phone back up, allow it to grab the new cert data, and then things will work. So if you have an issue, try config clearing a phone. If you still have an issue after the config clear, I would get rid of the cert to see if things come right back to normal. And if they do, then we need to figure out what's going on with the cert itself. And where that comes down to is just making sure the cert is valid. So you want to make sure the date of expiration is good. So if you've had like a wildcard that you've been using for a few years, depending on your issuer, you may be coming up on the cert expiring, which could be a problem. Make sure the chain's intact. So for missing specific files like the intermediate cert, the whole chain can't be validated, which can cause issues, or rather it will cause issues. And just make sure in general that cert is what it should be. If you follow those and you check those steps, generally you're not going to run into any issues installing certs on the server. A good rule of thumb though, especially for things like this, is definitely ask for our assistance. We're happy to help. Like I said, we won't actually piece the certs together. However, we will help deploy them. We will help with testing, and we will troubleshoot if needed. So definitely get in touch with our support team, and we can help you out with any pieces that you need there. And so that about wraps up our webinar for today. Are there any questions? Let's see. Is there a certificate process for the mobility router? The certificate process for the mobility router is exactly the same as the Edge Gateway, which is why I did not show both. The only difference is the mobility router has an internal and external interface versus the 4 separate interfaces that are used on the Edge Gateway. But the import works exactly the same. The generation works exactly the same, so you can follow those steps. Any other questions? Can we force TLS 1.2? Currently, no. TLS 1.0 is required for the 400 series phones and several other pieces of the Mitel infrastructure. So disabling 1.0 will actually make your system incredibly unstable. I would highly recommend not doing that. There may be changes coming down the pipe for that, but we don't have a confirmed date. Any other questions? All right, looks like that's what we have now. So just to make sure that you guys have the information to connect with us as needed, for our current customer resources, you can send us an email at support@inflowcommunications.com. We also do have a support portal at support.inflowcommunications.com where you can take a look at all of your tickets in one spot. You can update those tickets, close out tickets as needed, and even look at all the tickets for your organization if you're the overall administrator for your system. And then you can also reach us on the phone at 855-946-3569 or 855-9-INFLOW. We do have a 3-ring answer policy, so you will not be on the phone for 10 minutes waiting for a rep. And because voice is what we do, anybody you get will be able to assist you with your problem and get you on the right track moving forward. For information on Inflow support packages, you can email sales@inflowcommunications.com. And you can also reach us on the phone there at 844-446-3569. And so once again, my name is Tom Lyons, Senior Engineer with Inflow. Wanted to thank you very much for coming out for our certificate webinar today, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you so much for your time. You guys have a wonderful rest of your day.